Daniel Kingsley, a young, dynamic billionaire, lived what seemed to be the perfect life. After inheriting his father's vast empire and estate companies at just 25, he believed that everything was as it should be. His stepmother, Clarissa, and his two stepsisters, Amelia and Victoria, had always been part of his life since he was young. Despite losing his father, Daniel had grown up believing they were family, treating them as his own blood, and never suspecting the dark secrets they harbored. Clarissa and her daughters, on the other hand, had been scheming for years. They were preparing to take everything Daniel's father had left behind. They lived luxuriously off his wealth, even while planning his downfall. But the one person they didn't consider was Maria, the loyal maid who had been with the family for years. Unknown to them, Maria had witnessed several suspicious things, and her quiet nature had allowed her to move unnoticed within the house. She was the only one who knew of the evil going on in the mansion. It all began when Maria stumbled upon a letter while cleaning Daniel's stepmother's room. The letter seemed like a mere paper, but when she looked closer, she realized it was a legal document that Clarissa had been drafting. The document was meant to forge Daniel's signature, granting full control of his estate, companies, properties and financial assets to his stepmother. Maria's heart raced as she pieced together the dangerous puzzle. Though she had always felt something was off, this confirmed her suspicions. The stepmother's behavior towards Daniel was manipulative, and her daughters seemed too keen on Daniel's wealth, barely showing him genuine love or affection. Maria debated whether to tell Daniel immediately or gather more evidence. After all, this was a delicate situation, and Clarissa was a master of deception. Maria knew she had to act carefully, because any little mistake could cost Daniel everything. While Daniel remained blissfully unaware, Clarissa and her daughters often held private meetings in the mansion's private room. They would sit together, whispering about their plans to take over the company and control Daniel's finances. Victoria, the eldest, was especially ruthless. She believed she deserved the fortune more than Daniel did and often spoke about how she would marry into a powerful family after securing the wealth. Maria, on the other hand, calm as ever, often overheard their conversations. She was stunned by how they casually discussed Daniel's downfall as if he were nothing but an obstacle in their path. They even discussed ruining his reputation in the business world, painting him as incompetent and irresponsible. It became clear to Maria that these women were far more dangerous than she had initially thought. If their plan succeeded, Daniel would lose everything his father worked hard to build. One afternoon, while dusting in Clarissa's bedroom, Maria accidentally knocked over a small jewelry box. As she picked it up, she noticed a little hidden chamber in the jewelry box. Inside was a phone, something Clarissa had been using to make secretive phone calls. Without hesitation, Maria took a risk and quickly scrolled through the messages. What she found made her stomach crumble. The messages revealed conversations with a shady lawyer, detailing their progress on a forged will. As Maria read further, it became obvious that Clarissa had been planning this for years. The messages also revealed something that shook Maria to her core: Daniel was not Clarissa's biological son. In fact, his father had never married Clarissa. Daniel's stepmother had carefully constructed a web of lies to ensure her place in his life. Her two daughters belonged to her anonymous lawyer unknown to anyone. Maria was now more determined than ever to protect Daniel. But the question remained: how would she expose them without risking her life? Maria knew she couldn't do this alone. The stakes were too high, and she was just a maid, powerless against a family with immense influence and wealth. However, she remembered someone who might be able to help: Mr. Benson, Daniel's late father's lawyer and an old family friend. He had always been loyal to the Kingsley family and could be the key to unveiling the truth. Maria decided to approach him secretly, knowing that Clarissa and her daughters could have eyes everywhere. She arranged to meet Mr. Benson at a local restaurant under the guise of going to the market for the household groceries. When they met, she hesitated for a moment, but the urgency of the situation pushed her forward. She told him everything she had discovered, showing him the text messages and the letter because she made a photocopy of the letter and also took pictures of the messages. Mr. Benson's expression darkened as he realized the extent of the conspiracy. Together, they devised a plan to protect Daniel and expose Clarissa's betrayal. Mr. Benson didn't waste time. He began gathering legal documents and re-examining Daniel's inheritance. It soon became clear that Clarissa's marriage to Daniel's father had never been officially recorded. This was an important evidence that could nullify any claims Clarissa had over the estate. Meanwhile, Maria continued to work in the mansion, carefully observing Clarissa and her daughters, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Daniel, unaware of the storm roaming around him, continued to treat his so-called mother, who is actually his stepmother and stepsisters, with kindness. He even planned a lavish party for Amelia's upcoming birthday, showing no signs of suspicion. However, Maria knew the time was close to when she would have to tell him the truth. As she quietly moved through the house, she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. Clarissa was dangerous, and Maria was certain that she would not go down without a fight. The day of Amelia's birthday party arrived, and the Kingsley mansion was buzzing with activity. The living room was adorned with lavish decorations, and the finest guests from the city's elite had gathered to celebrate. Daniel spared no expense, as he always did, making sure everything was perfect for his sister, who was actually his stepsister. He had no idea that the very people he celebrated with were plotting his downfall. Maria kept a low profile, ensuring everything went smoothly for the party, but her mind was elsewhere. She had overheard another conversation between Clarissa and her daughters that morning. They were planning to make their move as soon as possible, and if possible that night. As Maria served champagne to the guests, her heart raced. She had to stay vigilant and find a way to stop whatever they had planned. Meanwhile, Mr. Benson was hard at work behind the scenes, gathering evidence and preparing to take legal actions. As the party went on, Maria seized the opportunity to have a brief, quiet moment with Daniel. She couldn't reveal everything yet, especially not in the middle of a celebration, but she felt the urgency to warn him about the people closest to him. She found him near the balcony, looking out at the city, unaware of the storm that was about to crash into his life. Mr. Daniel, Maria began carefully, her voice soft but serious, I know this may seem out of place, but I need to tell you to be careful. There are people around you who don't have your best interest at heart. Daniel frowned, puzzled by her words. What do you mean, Maria? Who are you talking about? Before she could explain further, Clarissa appeared, her eyes narrowing suspiciously at Maria's presence. Daniel, darling, there you are. We've been looking for you. Clarissa's sweet voice dripped with fake concern, and Maria quickly retreated, knowing now wasn't the time to reveal everything. But she had planted the seed of doubt in Daniel's mind. That was the first step. Clarissa couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Over the last few days, Maria had been acting strange, too quiet, too observant. She wondered if the maid had discovered something. After the party, Clarissa called her daughters into her study to discuss their next move. The women were nervous, sensing that their window of opportunity was closing. We need to speed up the plan, Clarissa said coldly, pacing the room. We can't afford any mistakes. If Daniel finds out the truth, everything we've worked for will be lost. Amelia and Victoria exchanged uneasy glances. They had grown up relying on their mother's cunning and manipulative ways, but this time felt different. Maria, the loyal maid who had always been invisible to them, was becoming a threat. Victoria, the more impulsive of the two, suggested confronting Maria, but Clarissa shook her head. We can't let her know we're onto her. We'll handle this carefully. The atmosphere in the mansion became tense after the party. Maria could feel the weight of Clarissa's eyes on her, watching her every move. It was clear that the stepmother suspected something, but Maria knew she had to keep her composure. She continued with her daily duties as though nothing had changed, while keeping her ears open for any signs of what the family was planning. Her priority now was finding a way to meet with Mr. Benson without raising suspicion. She couldn't afford to make a mistake at this stage, not when Clarissa and her daughters were on high alert. After a few days of waiting, Maria found her opportunity. Daniel had a business meeting in the city, which meant Clarissa and her daughters would also be occupied. Maria took the chance to leave the mansion under the guise of running errands. She met with Mr. Benson again, updating him on the situation. Together, they made a bold decision. It was time to reveal the truth to Daniel. Meanwhile, since Maria's unsure warning at the party, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He had always trusted his family. After all, they had been there for him since his father passed. But Maria's words haunted him. He found himself questioning things he had never doubted before. Why had his father never spoken much about Clarissa, his mother? Why did his sister seem so distant from him, despite his generosity? Daniel decided to do some investigating on his own. He went through old family documents, hoping to find something that would either confirm or dismiss his growing doubts. As he looked deeper into his father's past, small doubts began to appear. There were gaps in timelines, missing documents, and strange financial transactions. Daniel's doubts grew, but he didn't know how deep the betrayal went. Maria and Mr. Benson, on the other hand, agreed that the time had come for Daniel to know everything. They arranged a secret meeting, away from the mansion, to tell him the full extent of Clarissa's deception. Maria felt nervous, unsure of how Daniel would react. Would he believe them? Or would he dismiss it as a ridiculous accusation against the only family he knew? The day of the meeting, Daniel arrived at Mr. Benson's office. He was confused, not understanding why Maria had brought him there. As Mr. Benson began to explain what they had uncovered, the forged documents, Clarissa's lack of legal ties to his father, and the hidden messages, Daniel sat shockingly in silence. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He had been living a lie. The people he trusted most were the very ones plotting against him. His world began to crumble, but deep down, Daniel felt a surge of anger. He wasn't going to let them win. With the truth now revealed, Daniel felt a mixture of shock and fury. He took some time to process the gravity of the situation before confronting Clarissa and her daughters. His first step was to gather more information, ensuring he had all the evidence necessary to confront them openly. He worked closely with Mr. Benson, who helped him understand the legal ramifications and the best approach to take. Daniel decided to start by confronting Clarissa in private. He wanted to hear her side of the story, even though he had already seen enough to know that her intentions were bad. Clarissa, unaware of Daniel's knowledge, greeted him with her usual fake warmth. As Daniel laid out the evidence of her wickedness, the forged documents, her lack of legal marriage to his father, and her malicious intentions, her face cracked. Her initial shock quickly turned to anger, but Daniel was determined. He informed her that he would not tolerate any further deception and that the truth would come to light. Clarissa's reaction to the confrontation was explosive. She initially tried to deny everything, but as Daniel presented undeniable evidence, her defenses crumbled. Her anger turned to desperation, and she decided to move to threats and intimidation, trying to scare Daniel into submission. She argued that if she couldn't have the fortune, she would make sure Daniel's life was ruined. Despite her threats, Daniel remained calm. He had prepared for this confrontation, knowing that Clarissa might react violently. He recorded their conversation, ensuring that he had evidence of her threats and manipulations. Daniel then informed her that he had already contacted the authorities and was prepared to take legal action. Clarissa's plans were unraveling quickly, and her power was slipping through her fingers. The confrontation with Clarissa marked the beginning of a turbulent period for Daniel. While he had exposed a significant portion of the deceit, the battle was far from over. Daniel began to notice changes in the behavior of those around him. Some of his supporters seemed to distance themselves, while others who had been loyal began showing their true colors. Victoria, the most unpredictable of the stepsisters, seemed to be working behind the scenes to ruin Daniel's position further. She started spreading rumors about him, attempting to tarnish his reputation in the business world. Amelia, on the other hand, appeared more subdued, possibly feeling guilty or conflicted about the situation. Daniel realized he needed to be more careful about who he could trust, and he began to rely more on Maria and Mr. Benson for support. As the legal battle continued, Daniel found an unexpected support in Mr. Benson's old associate, Eleanor Marsh. Eleanor had been a close friend of Daniel's father and had a wealth of knowledge about the Kingsley family's business dealings. When Mr. Benson approached her for help, she agreed to assist, understanding the gravity of the situation. Eleanor proved to be a valuable asset. She provided Daniel with important information about his father's estate and helped uncover more evidence against Clarissa. Her connections and experience in handling high-profile cases brought a new level of strategy to their efforts. Despite her initial reluctance to get involved in family affairs, Eleanor's dedication to justice and her respect for Daniel's father motivated her to fight alongside them. As the legal proceedings continued, the case began to attract media attention. The story of the young billionaire, betrayed by his stepmother and stepsisters, captured the public's imagination. News outlets reported on the scandal, and the media only added to the pressure on Daniel. While the public support was overwhelming, the constant media updates made it difficult for Daniel to maintain any sanity. Clarissa and her daughters attempted to use the media to their advantage, staging public appearances and interviews to portray themselves as victims. They accused Daniel of being a vindictive and ungrateful son, hoping to sway public opinion in their favor. Daniel had to navigate the disloyal waters of public perception while continuing his legal battle, knowing that every move he made was being watched and analyzed. Throughout the situation, Maria remained a steadfast supporter of Daniel. Her role became increasingly important as the legal proceedings continued. She provided key testimonies and evidence that supported Daniel's case, despite the constant threats from Clarissa's camp. Her bravery and dedication were instrumental in countering the false narratives being spread by Clarissa and her daughters. One night, as Maria was preparing for another day in court, she received a threatening note from an unknown sender. It was clear that Clarissa was willing to go to extreme lengths to silence her. Despite the fear that gripped her, Maria chose to press on. She knew that her actions were vital for Daniel's fight for justice, and she refused to be intimidated by Clarissa's tactics. As the case progressed, Daniel and his legal team began to see significant breakthroughs. The evidence against Clarissa and her daughters continued to mount, and their fraudulent activities were becoming harder to deny. The turning point came when a key witness, Clarissa's former employee, came forward with critical information about the stepmother's illegal activities. The witness provided testimony that not only confirmed the forgery of the will but also detailed how Clarissa had manipulated financial records to divert funds from Daniel's inheritance. This revelation was a game-changer, turning the case in Daniel's favor and bringing the case to an important juncture. With mounting evidence and public support, Daniel felt a renewed sense of hope, knowing that justice was within reach. The legal battle reached its climax as the court date approached. Daniel, Maria, Mr. Benson, and Eleanor prepared for the final showdown with Clarissa and her daughters. The courtroom was packed with media, spectators, and legal representatives. The tension was visible as both sides presented their arguments and evidence. Clarissa, in a desperate attempt to salvage her reputation, took the stand and attempted to deny all accusations. However, the evidence presented by Daniel's team was overwhelming. The forged documents, witness testimonies, and financial records painted a clear picture of her deceit. As the trial progressed, it became evident that Clarissa's schemes were being exposed for all to see. The final moments of the trial were charged with anticipation as the verdict was about to be delivered. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. Daniel sat quietly, with by Mr. Benson and Eleanor, each of them filled with a mix of hope and apprehension. Clarissa and her daughters were visibly anxious, their earlier confidence now replaced by unease. As the judge read the verdict, the room fell silent. Clarissa was found guilty of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Her attempts to manipulate the legal system and deceive Daniel were exposed. The judge also ordered restitution to compensate Daniel for the financial losses and emotional distress caused by Clarissa's actions. The ruling was a significant victory for Daniel, but it was far from the end of the ordeal. Clarissa, stunned and defeated, was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Her daughters, equally shocked, faced the prospect of losing their privileged lifestyle. Daniel felt a mix of relief and sorrow. He had achieved justice, but it had come at a great personal cost. With the trial concluded, Daniel faced the challenge of rebuilding his life. The media coverage continued, but the focus shifted from the scandal to Daniel's plans for the future. He was determined to restore the Kingsley legacy and ensure that his father's vision for the company was realized. Maria, now a hero in the eyes of many, decided to step away from her role as a maid. Her bravery had made a significant impact, and she was offered a position as an advisor to help manage the transition of the estate. Daniel was deeply grateful for her loyalty and courage. He recognized her as a key supporter who had stood by him through the darkest times. As Daniel began to rebuild control over his company, he also had to work on repairing relationships with the people who had been affected by the scandal. He reached out to former business partners, employees, and friends, working to restore their trust and confidence in him. Eleanor continued to be a valuable advisor, helping Daniel navigate his father's business empire. They worked together to implement reforms and ensure that the company's operations were transparent and ethical. Daniel was committed to leading with integrity and rebuilding the legacy that had been tarnished by his stepfamily's deceit. With the legal and financial issues resolved, Daniel and Maria looked toward a new beginning. Daniel had gained a deeper understanding of his father's legacy and was dedicated to honoring it. He focused on philanthropic efforts, using his wealth to support causes that aligned with his values. As time passed, Daniel and Maria's relationship moved from employer and employee to trusted friends and supporters. Daniel appreciated Maria's unwavering support and dedication, and Maria admired Daniel's resilience and commitment to justice. Their bond grew stronger as they worked together on various projects and initiatives. After a few months of deep thought, Daniel decided to forgive Clarissa and her daughters, although he knew that their actions had left lasting scars. By releasing his bitterness, he found a sense of peace and closure. Forgiveness also helped him focus on positive change and the future, rather than dwelling on past grievances. Daniel's business continued to succeed, and he found joy in using his success to help others. He and Maria often collaborated on charitable events, and their efforts were well received by the community. The positive changes they implemented helped to restore the Kingsley name and build a legacy of integrity and compassion. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments, like, and subscribe for more interesting and educative videos like this.